what we just talked about. But I think what I've shared so far suggests that sort of the immunology of allergic disease and helminth infection are really quite closely tied together. And I think it's fair to say we still don't understand exactly why, when you don't have worm infection, you get allergies. And when you have allergies, you're less likely to have worm infection. But there certainly does seem to be a close association. And so the next sort of obvious question that people have asked is, well, so if I have an allergic disease, can I give myself a parasite and make my disease go away? Or, what can I do about this at home? So, interestingly, indeed, people with allergic disease, both sort of just doing it themselves at home, or there have also been clinical trials that have studied this, have infected themselves with parasites to see if it can make their allergies go away. Autoimmune disease as well. So I think, in fact, this idea is a little bit more prevalent in the autoimmune disease world. But people will indeed go online. There's a company in Southeast Asia that will send you actually pig whipworm eggs to treat yourself with to get rid of your IBD or your MS or your allergies. You can look it up. Get those eggs sent to your home. And anecdotally, people have indeed reported that infecting themselves with parasites alleviates the symptoms of their allergies or autoimmune diseases. And so this has also been studied in a rigorous way. And so, kind of disappointingly, there's both evidence for and evidence against this particular strategy. So in terms of the evidence for, just as an example, children in Africa were given a skin prick test to test whether or not they were allergic to house dust mites. And if you looked at the kids that were currently parasitized, far fewer of them were reactive to house dust mite compared to those who weren't parasitized. So that kind of supports the idea. In addition, sort of in a more rigorous test, looking at adults that have ulcerative colitis, so an autoimmune disease of the intestine, these patients received either a placebo or some of these exciting pig whipworm eggs for 12 weeks, and then their disease was scored. And actually, as it turns out, the people who got the eggs, who got the parasite eggs, did better. Placebo helped a little bit too, but that's almost always the case in these kinds of trials. But this was a pretty significant effect. And so these data suggest that, yeah, you've got terrible ulcerative colitis that doesn't respond to anything. Take some big whipworm and see what happens. However, disappointingly, there's also good evidence that this doesn't work. So 100 adults here with pretty severe allergic rhinitis received, again, placebo or some of these pig parasite eggs, and then their symptoms were scored. And this is kind of small, I'm sure you can't see it from the back, but looking at this, their symptom score, it's the same. So there is absolutely no improvement in symptoms for the patients that were treated with parasite eggs compared to the placebo. And so where does this leave us? So we have this established correlation between helminth infection and allergy and autoimmune disease. We have some ideas of the possible cellular mechanisms, but treating allergic patients with parasites doesn't work. So what can we actually do in the course of our daily lives to perhaps limit this rise of allergic disease or autoimmune disease that we see in the US and other places? And so there's some cool future directions here. I'm thinking about, what exactly are these mechanisms by which microorganisms sort of train our immune system, and can we do better in terms of researching those mechanisms? How do individual genetics impact these pathways? The microbiome, so all of the organisms, the microbes that live inside your gut and help you digest food, and all of those bacteria that live within you. How does that impact some of these pathways? And then, how can we shape our lives and manage our exposures? Environmental toxin exposure, the food we eat. Should we be eating organic food? Should we be letting our kids, play outside in the dirt? All of these sort of small things that perhaps could actually make a difference. If we have a few more parasites or a few more exposures, is that actually good for us? Is there a happy medium between being sort of a healthy population with great sanitation and access to clean food and water, and also having the proper exposures that can train our immune system to do its job correctly? And so then in the last couple of seconds, I'm just going to tell you a little bit more specifically, now that you know all about type 2 immune responses, I'm going to tell you a little bit more specifically about my research and a little bit of the research that goes on at Cornell. So there's lots of research in allergic disease at Cornell. Much of it actually relates to animal allergies. So we have a couple of investigators who are really interested in allergic diseases in horses, which if you didn't know, they get really terrible skin allergies in response to insect bites. My lab in particular looks at allergic diseases in dogs, and we study in particular how lipids, so for those of you who are biochemistry fans, I talked a lot about proteins, these cytokine messengers that the immune system produces, but lipids fats are also produced in this context. And so my lab is interested in how these two very different types of biochemical molecules can help orchestrate these responses. My lab is also interested in some of these epithelial cell events. And so what exactly are the nature of these signals that tell your epithelial cells to become really mucousy and gross in order to either get rid of opponents or mistakenly attack allergens? And so much of the work that goes on in my lab, I think it is quite molecular and cellular in nature. So we're focused really on some of the nitty-gritty pathways that make these responses go. And I think that's something that excites me every day when I get up to go to work. Because all of the therapies that we have, for example, for allergic diseases, are based on an understanding of these pathways. So when you take Benadryl, it's immediately interfering with these guys, actually, the mast cell. When you take immunotherapy, if you get allergy shots, for example, that technology is completely based on an understanding of how the immune system works during allergic disease and stopping those events. And I think the same can be true in helminth infection. If we understand how the immune system works, perhaps we can develop treatments that are not necessarily directed at killing the parasite, but that are directed at making your own immune response better. And so that's just kind of a very broad overview of what I do and what some others at Cornell do. So I have to say thank you. This is my lab, and so these are the folks that make all of the work possible. And we have many, many fantastic collaborators. So I'll open the floor here now to talk a little bit about careers in biomedical sciences and in academia. But something that I always like to do to start this conversation is to point out that this is a team effort. So if you're somebody who enjoys working in groups, working with a team towards a common goal, science is a great place for you. I think we have this perception of scientists as being very antisocial, nerdy peeps who hide in the lab and don't talk to anybody. And there couldn't be anything further from the truth. Modern science is a collaborative team effort. Science and industry, in particular pharmaceutical companies, is very team-driven. And so I always like to point out that fact and some of the people on my team who help me out. Also, if you're interested a little bit more in animal health, this is the Baker Institute and the wonderful people who work there. And here's our website if you'd like to take a look. These are my puppies, Hank and Suze. But with that, I'd like to open the floor for questions, and then also talk a little bit about questions you have about careers, what it takes to sort of go through the scientific training, what a career in science actually looks like, any of those questions. So happy to talk about stuff I presented or any of those career directions and questions.
A moment ago, you hypothesized that perhaps if like children were exposed to more dirt basically for a period of time, that perhaps maybe allergies would be on the rise. So do you know if there's been any like long-term studies where children in developed countries like the United States have actually been exposed to more things over, I don't feel like a long-term many-year study, but has there been anything like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So in Amish communities in particular, and some Mennonite communities, there have been really excellent long-term studies done looking at those kids. So those communities are still farming communities, so the kids are in the barn, they're more exposed to dirt and diverse microorganisms from the agrarian environment than, for example, kids in cities, and they just don't get allergies. So those, and they still live in an environment where generally they do have access to sanitation, they have access to clean food and water, they have access to medical care, as needed. But that early exposure does seem to correlate with lower levels of allergy and autoimmune disease.
And when we say early exposure, how early, for how long does that need to?
Yeah, I think that's less clear. The idea is that the earlier the better is good. So, even in infancy, exposure to a healthy range of microorganisms is good. But that's less clear, I think.
So was a study introduced to you, or were you sort of interested in it in a different way? How did you get about it?
Yeah, so Ashley's question is how I became interested in biology, I guess, in this particular field. So as I mentioned at the beginning, I was always kind of interested in how the natural world worked as a kid, but I went to college as a 19th century English major. So things kind of changed a little bit in my college career. And so I started taking some biology, sort of general biology classes as an undergraduate. And I found that I was just really excited by the opportunity to learn how things worked in our bodies and sort of in the natural world in general. And I have to say that most of what I have done in my career has been kind of a happy accident. So while I was an undergraduate, I did some undergraduate research with a retired former Merck employee who was just kind of volunteering at my college. He turned out to be Bill Campbell, who won the Nobel Prize for his work on anti-parasitic drugs. But when I was an undergraduate, he was just kind of volunteering and helping with some undergraduate research. So through working with him, I became really excited about parasites. He was really excited about parasites. And so that kind of led me to follow up with graduate work to get my PhD. For a while, I thought I wanted to be a doctor. But then I decided I didn't want to do that because of all the paperwork, which is, probably uninformed. But, so from that interest, I went into graduate school and sort of developed my interest from there. But I have to say, for all of you who don't have a firm plan about what you're going to be doing when you're 37, that's probably okay, because I'm not positive what I'll be doing when I'm 37. And that's only a year from now. Other questions about, yeah?
In the beginning of your talk, you mentioned that there's also a rise of allergies in, sounded like domestic pets. Is there evidence that in perhaps like places like Africa or developing nations, are those types of animals having these are they seeing the same trends there as we're seeing here with their pets?
Yeah, that is less clear, I have to say. So the problem with dogs, and we'll use dogs as an example, is that there are very few places in the world where dog health is tracked on an individual level. So here we all have a medical file that goes with us wherever we go. We're tracked on an individual level, and you can look at individual medical records, to see who's allergic and who's not in informed consent studies. For dogs, it's not like that. Even here in the U.S., there might be dogs on the farm that never go see a vet, they have the farm vet see them. Or, other countries, especially, I think in resource-poor areas, there's just absolutely no health records for domestic animals at all. Some countries do keep sort of national registries of dogs and cats. So Finland and Norway and Sweden, for example, and there you can actually see that allergic disease is on the rise. So you can track over time and show that the prevalence has gone from about 1% to more like 5 to 6% in dogs in those countries. But what dogs, for example, look like in Nigeria, we don't know. Other questions? Well, thank you all again. It's really fun to come and talk to you today. I will certainly stick around for a few minutes, so if anyone has specific questions you want to come up and ask me or discuss, please do. And for those of you who are interested in a career in science, please let me know, and I'm happy to help in any way. It's a super exciting career. I think I get up every day and I'm excited to go to work because I get to be creative, do new things every day, and discover new stuff. So it really is a cool field to be in, and I think it's a field that's growing as well. So thank you again, and thanks for the invite.